I'm Amy Newell-Large. I am the beer ambassador at the Moab Brewery, located in Moab, Utah, right in the heart of several national parks. It's a big part of the mountain biking and rock climbing capital of the United States. We have a lot of outdoor stuff going on here. The Moab Brewery itself was founded in 1996 by Johnny B, Dave, and their partners. We are now sending beer outside of our doors. We're distributing to several states all around the area. You can keep up with us by visiting our website or by visiting us on Facebook. The purpose of this video is to introduce you to our company and our beers and to give you an idea of what we're doing here at the Moab Brewery. I'd like to introduce you to Jeff Van Horn. He is our brewmaster and has been working with us since 2002.
I started in '87 home brewing and 95, I think, at Uena Brewing Company. So didn't really ever mean to do it professionally. But when I looked for a career, it was a great fit.
So we here at the Moab Brewery are very fortunate with the water that we have as our resource. It is in fact naturally filtered. It comes to us through the La Salle Mountains, is spring-fed and filtered through several layers of sandstone prior to it coming to us here at the brewery. It means that we don't have to treat our water basically. It's clean, crisp, clear, and wonderful for brewing.
We will use probably about 16 different types of grain. The main grain that will be in most of our mashes would be two-row barley. We use red wheat, white wheat, rye, oats, and then it'll have things like caramel malt or chocolate malt, but in a lot smaller allotment to make up the beer.
So malts are one of the most essential ingredients for brewing, and they provide us with sugars, they provide us with color, flavor, texture, and this comes from two main types of malts, base malts and specialty malts. Base malts provide us primarily with the sugars that we're going to use to turn into alcohol later on. They're not really adding color or flavor, but definitely giving us an important element. The specialty grains are ones that are giving us the flavor, the color. Specialty grains provide color, texture, mouthfeel, a little bit of extra sugar, but really, like I said, we're getting that from the base malt primarily. Mashing is the first process that happens here at our brew house. It's like making a giant vat of oatmeal. We're combining the hot water with the crushed up grain and letting it all mix together. In the end, we'll filter out the sugar water that's created, and that's called wort, W-O-R-T. And this wort is what will continue on in the brewing process. But don't worry, that grain, we don't get rid of it. It goes to local farmers. They feed their cattle and their pigs, so it's not going to waste. Hops are the next big ingredient used in the brewing process.
What we do use are all pelletized, and so they kind of look like, most people say, rabbit food, but they are very pungent in aroma and flavor. The earlier in the boil that we put the hops in, the more bitterness that they create and less aroma and flavor characteristics. And the later we put them in the boil, or the less they're boiled, they have more aroma and flavor. And so toward the end of the boil is when we put all the floral aromatic hops that hit your nose when you smell the beer.
Now hops, when they grow on vines in these leaf-like cones. And at the center of that cone is a resin called lupulin. And that lupulin is what gives us the bitterness that we get, like the bitterness in an IPA. Boiling is the second part of the brewing process that we do here at our brew house. During the boil, the main object is to isomerize the hops and to get out a wonderful hop flavor from that. The very first time that hops are added is at the beginning of the boil. As soon as you get a nice rolling boil going, pitch in a good amount of hops. Now those hops are in there for a long time. They'll be in there for anywhere from 90 to 60 minutes. This means that they're really being stripped down just to that acid. But really though, the flavor is coming from the second addition. Primarily what we're focused on with this addition is flavor. So anytime you take a sip of a beer and it tastes grassy, piney, getting that primarily from the second addition. And finally, the third addition is mostly for aroma. That nice smell of grapefruit or, pine forest that you get out of an IPA, that's all coming from the last addition. The final stage of the actual brewing process is fermentation. This is where we allow the yeast to really work its magic. So we like to say it's the brewer that makes the wort, but it's the yeast that makes the beer. It's not beer until the yeast has done its stuff. And by done its stuff, I mean it's produced alcohol, CO2, and heat. Those are the three main byproducts from the yeast activity. Heat, doesn't matter, we're gonna chill it down anyway.
So we run cold water against the beer to chill it in the heat exchanger. That water from there is sent back into our hot water tank. It's about 130 degrees. And so we can kind of reuse some of that heat and capture it. On a pump over, typically it's about 700-800 gallons that we'll use worth of water to help chill the beer down.
The CO2 we actually let blow off, so that way we're equalizing the pressure of our tanks all the time and we don't have a big explosion of beer.
This is CO2. It's being produced by the yeast, eating the sugar and reproducing. In that, it also produces the alcohol. So that's one of the byproducts that we have in the brewery.
And the alcohol, obviously we all appreciate that part. It's the part that, like I said, makes it beer. So during the fermentation process, there's two main types of yeast that can be used. One is an ale yeast, and the other is a lager yeast, and we use both of them here at the brewery.
This is pretty yeasty, and it's right at the end of its fermentation. We'll check the sugar levels to find out if we can start putting the yeast to sleep.
An ale yeast is going to be fermented at a warmer temperature, usually between 64 and 74 degrees. And what happens is that because of the warmer temperature, the yeast does all of its activity at a different spot in the tank. In an ale yeast, the yeast does all of its work right at the top. It's moving all around, being very active, all at the top. And when it's done, it's eaten up all of those sugars, it will drop down to the bottom. Whereas a lager yeast, it's much cooler temperatures. That one usually right around 55 degrees. And because the cooler temperatures, it's doing all of its work down low, down at the bottom of the tank. When it's all done, it will also drop just a little bit less to the bottom that's right there. Yeast is actually one of the most underestimated ingredients in beers. It will add to the richness and complexity of the beer. Most people think of a beer as being either hoppy or malty, but a beer can actually be yeasty or yeast-driven too. Perfect example is a German Hefeweizen. Now this style is defined by its banana, clove, and bubblegum flavors, but nobody's adding a banana or bubblegum to their beer. All of that is coming 100% from the yeast activity. Typically, Belgian styles are very yeast-driven, and they're wonderful if you want to experience what a yeast beer is really defined like. We measure alcohol using a hydrometer. This actually measures the density of the product.
So how much sugar? The more sugar, the more it suspends. Took it to a 2, so a nice and dry beer. A stout would be about a 3, 3.5, something like that.
So we're able to tell if there's a lot of sugars left in there, a little sugars left in there, and that will eventually tell us what the projected alcohol content will be.
This is a bright tank. This is where the beer would go after the fermentation. We'd either filter it or transfer it one way or another. It would end up in one of these tanks and be carbonated. We're gonna keg it out. It's pretty simple. We just tap the beer with regular beer taps and fill the keg through the downspout, through that spout. As this equalizes a little, then we'll go ahead and open it and start allowing the keg to vent. And so it'll allow air out of the keg as it's filling, and it's filling from the bottom up. So we'll fill all the way to the top. Foam will start coming out of here, and at that point we'll shut it down and it's a full keg. This is the canning line. The cans come to us, they're clean, new, and we load them on the machine on the loading deck. And then after that, it goes through a rinser, which hits a little sanitizer to it, and then it loads onto the line. The first fill heads, there's 5 of them, and they purge it with CO2, the cans. And once there's a CO2 barrier in the cans, it'll move on to the fill head. The fill head is where the beer enters the can. Once it's full, then it'll move on to the capper. The capper jets a little more CO2 under the cap, and it heads on to the seamer, and the seamer is what closes the can. After that, it heads off to the packing or pack off line, where employees put the 4-pack cap on the top and pack it into cases. And so every week orders come in for different products. We build those orders and then have to get them out of the door. So that's where we're pulling orders out of the cooler and loading them on the truck. Beer that we're producing today will be sold in the next 30 days.
Now it's time for me to introduce you to the Moab Brewery beers. First up, Johnny's American IPA. This beer is named for Johnny B., our owner, and it features bold, classic American hops. Don't worry though, we have some nice golden malt in there for support, but we dry hop this one for an aggressive aroma. We dry hop it, in fact, with a Chinook hop. So if you taste pininess right up front, yeah, that's gonna be delicious in the end. In addition to making a session style of this beer, which we carry on tap, we also make a full-strength 7% canned version of Johnny's IPA. It's just as delicious and hoppy as the session.
This is our Red Rye IPA at 75 IBU. Rye and hops, one of beer's best combinations. Our Red Rye IPA blends the spicy characteristics of rye malt with bold flavors of American hops. We have it available at 4% on draft, in a session can at 4%, and in a high point can at 7%. This Red Rye is a medium-bodied ale with a rich caramel hue and zesty, distinctive flavor.
Over the top, Hefeweizen. Now this beer is an American wheat style. It's unfiltered, which means that it will be a little bit more cloudy due to the yeast that's left in the beer. Now that yeast left in the beer will actually provide a nice amount of flavor, a little bit of citrus, but we also serve it with a lemon so people can kick up that citrus if they like. Now we're moving on to our Baja Especial. This beer is also an American wheat style, but it's been filtered, which means that it doesn't have any yeast particles left in it. You'll notice it's crystal clear. It's a perfect, refreshing beer. Think about the kind of beer you'd want to drink after mowing the lawn for an hour. This is that beer. Nice, crisp, clean finish, very light-bodied, goes down smooth. This is our Raven Oatmeal Stout. Now this beer is a classic Irish dry stout with great roasty qualities, nice creamy head, but a very delicate finish to it. It's actually not as thick as most people think a stout might be. We save that for our Desert Select Stout. This one, definitely refreshing with a little bit of a coffee tone right up front. This is our Porcupine Pilsner. It's also a great, crisp, refreshing beer, but we do emphasize the hops with this beer as well, so it has a little more body than something like our Baja does. But once again though, crisp, clean, and refreshing. This is our Rocket Bike Lager. It's a steam-style beer, amber in color, medium body. Definitely great for anybody who's a fan of slightly malty beers. But it does use a lager yeast, so it's going to give you a nice, clean finish. Not a lot of linger with this beer. Next up, our Derailleur Red Ale. This is a wonderful, complex, malty beer, but it definitely features a hop finish. It's what I like to describe as an extremely well-balanced beer. Lots of caramel malt and a little bit of toffee tones right up front, but you're getting a blast of American hops at the finish. All around delicious. This is our Dead Horse Amber Ale. It's a very classic English mild ale. It's focused on its drinkability. We've got a little bit of malt up front, nice, crisp, a little bit of hop bite at the end to it. But all around, it is our most drinkable beer. It's the most popular beer that we have here on tap. And you can also find it in cans, available at grocery stores, wherever we distribute. all around delicious, this is our Squeaky Bike Nut Brown Ale, the latest addition to our permanent tap line. It's a nutty delight, and nutty is definitely the focus. We also use some wonderful chocolate malts in this to give it a wonderful rich color, an earthy maltiness, but a nice light body that's not going to weigh you down. Next up is our root beer. Now, our root beer is actually a very interesting, unique hybrid between sarsaparilla and root beer. The sarsaparilla gives it a wonderful sweetness right up front, but the root beer provides a great creamy finish.
Here we are introducing our Desert Select program, a handcrafted program that's made all by hand, put in the bottle by hand, and bottle conditioned. Bottle conditioned is a program where we add the yeast and a little dose of sugar, set it in the bottle, set it upstairs, and let it naturally ferment and naturally carbonate in the bottle. It's a high coveted program that's doing very well for us and has been around for quite a few years. Tripel at 8.59% at 32 IBUs. Our Tripel is a pale colored ale made with Pilsen malt and a traditional addition of Belgian candy sugar, then hopped with German Noble and Saaz hops. This ale has a light malt nose and a subtle hop aroma. In traditional fashion, this Tripel has been conditioned in the bottle to create a natural carbonation and a long-term stability. Next on the list is our Scotch Ale at 8.59% alcohol by volume, has 20 IBUs. Wee Heavy is made with fine two-row barley and a portion of smoked malt, English hops, pure Moab water, and Scottish yeast. It is fermented on French oak and bottle conditioned. Wee Heavy is a brown rich ruby color and a sweet malt character. The last one on the list today is Black Imperial IPA. At 8.59%, it is well over 100 IBUs. Our Black Imperial IPA is dark, rich, and extremely hoppy, made from the finest two-row barley, fresh Moab water, house yeast, lots of hops, and then is fermented on American oak, dry hopped and bottle conditioned.